Hello, this is Jim, W4JBM, and I wanted to share another project that I've got going that's on the bench right now. This is a Tektronix 310A oscilloscope, and it's I believe it was made back in the early 60s. It's a fairly small unit. It's got a handle. It was designed to be carried. So it's compact, not a lot of features or functions, just single trace, basic attenuator and the time base. So nothing fancy, but for the time, kind of a neat little scope for field applications and things like that. I first got interested in the 310 and the 310A when I saw it. Actually, it was a computer wallpaper picture that showed the side and the tubes glowing, and it was really well done, and just kind of I'd always wanted to restore a Tektronix tube scope and hadn't found one, and so I thought the 310 would be a nice one to look for, and I happened across a guy on a antique radio mailing list that was selling off a bunch of stuff, and he had the 310A, and he also had a 310. The 310A here, he said would power up, and it does, or did. And it had a trace. You could at least see the trace, and the vertical portion of that was working. If you increased the voltage in the input, or took it negative, you could see the trace actually move up or down on the screen. It just didn't move left to right. So something's wrong with the time base or the horizontal portion of the oscilloscope. The 310A the 310 that I got is unfortunately pretty much dead, and I don't know that I bought it more for parts. I think I paid $50 for the pair of them, and then there was also a replacement CRT, which is always one of the things I worry about burning out one day and not being able to find a replacement for. But I got a brand new in-box replacement CRT for like $20, if I remember right. The guy lived in Florida. Told me he was just a little bit off the interstate. I was down there on a business trip, and it was like 50 miles and well over an hour off the interstate to get back into the swamp, where he had an old trailer and a bunch of storage sheds just filled with electronic gear. This was actually some of the stuff that was in better shape. I've pulled the capacitors out and started to replace them. You can see that I've mounted a piece of just perf board in there to mount the capacitors on. Originally, through this section where those two are right now, there were these larger capacitors. This capacitor actually is a two-section 15 microfarad per section capacitor, so 30 microfarads total. They just wired them in parallel, and they mounted three of them in here, and all three of those were in parallel for a total of 90 microfarads. These are actually 47 microfarad capacitors, and with the pair, I've got 94 microfarads instead of the 90 that was in their original. So that gives me a little bit of space. These were also insulated. These were on the negative supply, and the case on most old electrolytic capacitors is connected to the negative lead, and that, in this case, since it's the negative supply, the case would have been at the full negative supply voltage and presented a pretty significant hazard just sitting in there where you could touch it. So with the newer capacitors, the case is actually insulated and separate from either of the leads, so I won't have that problem with it. But I've got two more power supply capacitors. I believe one is the negative regulated supply, and then the positive supply is the last one, and that will be done. One of the things that's kind of cool about this scope is the way it's constructed. It's hinged in the back, and you can actually open it up and get to the guts and do whatever you need to do there. The 310A, actually going back a step, the 310 was the first oscilloscope that Tektronix put into production that used a printed circuit board. And they ran that production run for like a year or so and had some fairly significant issues, and went back and redesigned the scope using the same circuitry for the most part. I believe they converted from a tube rectifier to solid state rectifiers, all solid state rectifiers, but they went back to kind of the traditional construction that Tektronix was known for. These are ceramic blocks with little solder tabs, and makes for a very solid, reliable construction if you work at it right and kind of know what you're doing. It's easy to work on, easy to troubleshoot. I like it a lot. So the 310, part of the problem was with the circuit boards. They were two-sided boards, and at that point in time, the plating through, or the I've drawn a blank on what they call them now, but basically the way the top and bottom traces were bound where they needed to be bound were with a rivet in the 310, and that the 310 over time that would cause problems, and the solder and the connection would become loose. A lot of that has to do with the heat that the 310 generated. These things put out and consume about 175 watts of power. All that comes out in the form of heat, except for a little bit that comes out in the form of light from the tubes glowing and from the CRT. But for the most part, the 175 watts that's consumed is converted into heat, and you can see that as we close the top, there's not a lot of room in there for air circulation. There actually was an accessory that would go on the bottom. It was a small stand, just a ramp kind of stand with a fan in the front that would force air up through the 310 to facilitate cooling. So that's, and then also one other kind of, I guess, handy feature. There's thermal protection, so that if it gets above, I believe, 170 degrees, 175 degrees, or something like that, the transformer, well, basically the whole thing just powers off. It disconnects power. You can see where I've started wiring some of the two replacement capacitors in there, and like I said, I've still got two more to go. One of the other things that's kind of interesting that you'll come across if you see people talking about the 310 and the 310A. In the manual, it talks about that the transformer, the power transformer here, has an indefinite warranty. And that's the word that Tektronix used, indefinite. And there's people that joke about, I've actually never seen anybody say they've had the transformer go bad, but kind of one of the standing jokes among people that work on the 310 is that if the transformer's bad, they're going to try and take Tektronix up on that indefinite warranty on the transformer. Actually, Tektronix transformers, even if you find a very beat up oscilloscope that's been neglected, sitting out in a barn, is pretty much trashed. The transformers have a really good reputation, and 90% of the time, better than 90% of the time, even an oscilloscope that's been pretty much trashed, if the transformer is still there and hasn't been physically damaged, you'll find that it works. That transformers was definitely one of the strong things that in their manufacturing. So I've got the filter capacitors. As soon as I replace those, the other problem that I've got is there's some of these smaller capacitors. This one is 8 microfarad, 450 working volts, and you can see that it's actually ruptured here and started to leak. I don't have very many low capacitance, high voltage capacitors, so 8 microfarads at 450 volts isn't something I have sitting around. I've got some parts on order that I'll need for that, and a few of the other sections. You can see some capacitors up here towards the front that I'm going to need to replace also. So that's what I got going on with this one. Probably will, once I get the power supply in, set it aside while I wait on the parts for the rest of the capacitors, and then start trying to troubleshoot it. You can see in here where at some point somebody has done some work and soldered the neon bulb in there. So hopefully nobody has butchered this too bad or done anything that I'll have to reverse. But overall, I think it'll clean up really good. Be kind of a cute little addition to the bench. And when I got this, I actually was going through a phase of Tektronix equipment. There's a 7615 storage oscilloscope, and then some of the 500 series modules in 503 frames there. So I like Tektronix stuff a lot, and I'm looking forward to getting this scope working. I'll keep you guys posted on the progress. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.